Most men think when a woman pulls away, the answer is more effort, more messages, more attention, more chasing. But in reality, that's exactly what accelerates the distance. Because attraction doesn't respond to pressure, it responds to emotional clarity. She didn't stop talking to you because she was busy. She stopped because something inside her changed, long before you ever noticed. And here's the uncomfortable truth most men never hear. Women rarely pull away suddenly. They detach in silence, while still showing up normally. So by the time you notice the distance, it's already been happening for a while. And that creates one of the biggest illusions in dating. You think she got distant because of something you did recently. But what if the real reason started much earlier and had nothing to do with that moment? So the real question is, what actually makes a woman emotionally pull away without saying a word? In this video, we're going to break down 4 brutal psychological truths behind why women withdraw emotionally. Not guesses, not cliches, real behavioral psychology, attachment patterns, and emotional investment dynamics. Because once you understand this, something changes immediately. You stop chasing confusion, you stop overthinking mixed signals, and you start seeing patterns instead of panic. This isn't about blaming her, and it's not about blaming yourself either. It's about understanding how attraction actually fades in real human behavior. And once you see it clearly, you'll never interpret distance the same way again. At first, everything feels easy. She replies fast, she asks questions, she engages naturally, but over time, something shifts. Not dramatically, not obviously, just slowly. A little less excitement in her replies, a little more delay, a little more distance. This is emotional saturation. In psychology, when emotional stimulation becomes predictable, the brain stops releasing the same level of engagement chemicals, especially dopamine tied to novelty. So what happens? She doesn't decide to lose interest. She just feels less emotionally activated. And most men miss this completely because nothing bad happened. So what should you learn from this? Attraction needs emotional movement, not chaos, not drama, but variation. Shared experiences, curiosity, tension, growth. If everything becomes predictable, connection quietly weakens. And when that happens, she doesn't fight it. She just drifts, which leads to something deeper. At the beginning, you were exciting without trying. You weren't overthinking. You weren't adjusting yourself. You were just present. But then something changes. You start caring more. You start trying to do it right. You start managing how she perceives you. And slowly, your energy shifts. You become safe. But safety alone doesn't sustain attraction. This connects to attachment psychology. Humans are drawn to emotional balance, not instability, but not emotional flatness either. When you become too careful, too controlled, too predictable, the emotional charge disappears. So what do? You stop over-managing your behavior. You stop filtering your personality. You stop trying to be perfectly consistent. Instead, you stay natural. Because emotional engagement comes from presence, not performance. And when that disappears, distance begins. But here's where it gets even more important. You might not notice it at first, but subtle changes happen. She mirrors your texting less. She initiates less. She invests slightly less emotionally, and you respond by adjusting without realizing it. You start putting in more effort to fix the gap. But instead of closing the distance, it expands. This is emotional reciprocity imbalance. In human psychology, people naturally match the emotional investment level of the other person over time. So if she feels slightly less energy, she unconsciously reduces hers to match. And if you try to overcompensate, it creates pressure, not connection. So what breaks this cycle? You stop escalating effort to chase balance. You stabilize yourself instead. You match energy without overinvesting. You stay consistent without chasing. Because attraction stabilizes when effort is balanced, not forced. Now let's pause here for a second. Pattern interrupt, mid-video 6 words. Here's something most men never realize. By the time you notice she's pulling away, She has already emotionally tested the relationship internally dozens of times, not consciously, but through small moments, delays, reactions, emotional responses. So the real question is, were you losing her in one moment? Or slowly in many moments you didn't notice? And that leads to the final truth. This is the hardest one for men to accept. Because from your perspective, everything looks normal. You're still talking, still texting, still interacting, but internally, she's already detached. Emotional leaving happens before physical leaving. This is tied to attachment disengagement theory. When emotional investment drops below a certain threshold, people begin detaching internally before they ever express it outwardly. So by the time she becomes busy, the emotional exit has already happened. And what most men do at that point is try harder, more texts, more attention, more effort. But at that stage, effort doesn't rebuild attraction. It amplifies pressure. So what should you actually do? You stop chasing clarity through her behavior. You start observing patterns instead. You detach from the emotional panic response. Because you cannot rebuild connection at the moment of exit. You can only recognize it. And that recognition changes everything. Here's the truth most men never get told. She didn't become a different person overnight. You just started seeing the real trajectory too late. And that's what hurts. Not the loss itself, but the realization that it was unfolding quietly all along. But this isn't about blame. It's about awareness. Because once you understand how emotional distance actually develops, you stop taking it personally. You stop overreacting. You stop chasing closure that doesn't exist. And more importantly, you stop abandoning yourself just to hold on to someone who is already halfway gone. Because real emotional strength isn't about keeping someone. It's about staying grounded when things change, without losing yourself in the process. If this resonated with you, then you've probably experienced this pattern more than once. The slow shift, the confusion, the sudden emotional distance that wasn't actually sudden at all. So I want to ask you something. At what point did you first feel her energy change, even slightly? Drop it in the comments. And in the next video, we're going deeper into something even more revealing. Why some men accidentally push emotionally available women away without realizing what they're signaling. Because sometimes, the moment you stop reacting emotionally is the moment you finally start seeing clearly.